right now. And nope, I don't see the ads actually, so I will have to look into the settings. Okay. Interesting. I think I have an echo or something like that. Good morning. So, can I actually detach the chat and not have the whole window? How is this working?
Very much a delay.
Yeah.
It's like the last time, we've got a delay when you speak and then when it comes to the hangout. So I might actually mute you.
Okay. So,
If you mute yourself, I think, in your hangouts.
can I do that? Let's check.
The microphone.
Oops. Yeah, there we go. There. Okay. So, is this working? That's weird. I still hear myself. Oh, it's okay. I'll live with this. It's very weird.
I have to remember to type my questions as well.
I guess, yes. Okay, so let's start. Actually going to compile. I wish I had a way to keep this on top of everything. Wow. Okay, here we are. So let's just launch a playground. Oh, weird. What's going on with this guy? Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, so I can do it here. I'm not sure I can do it in Visual Studio easily. So here I can do something like that. Is it better? Okay, so here I won't be able to do anything for this little guy though. Well, I guess I could just capture that window instead. Can try to do that, but I think it will mess up with the setup of the recording here. Let's see, can I do capture, display, capture cursor? I can try. Okay. So resolution. Let's go down to 1080p. Is that any better or is it worse? No, okay. I'm going back to where I was then. Okay. Yeah. I need to improve that. Okay, so the chat keeps disappearing. There we go. Yes, real window manager would be nice. Okay, so let's. I don't have your questions anymore. Do you have the question somewhere? Just want to see what's going on with this guy here. Yeah, I'm going to deactivate this because it's annoying. So, there, no more blinking. Let's pause it. So when you press the space bar, it will actually pause the profiler. At the top of the profiler, you can see the current thread. We have more than one thread. Like you have the main thread where everything happens except for things like loading resources, which happen in the task runner thread. Like you can see here, bitmap decompressing is happening on this thread. We have another thread for all resource requests itself, and another thread for the sound streaming. And we can add many other threads, it's just the one we have currently here. So let's look at the main thread. It tells us that the current frame took 16.6 milliseconds, and that the biggest one over the last second was almost 2 seconds. Sorry? Oh, yeah, sorry. It's page up, page down. Let me actually find it here. Profile. That's not here. That's in the random. Yeah, those are the shortcuts here. So the main, the gray bar at the top should be the current frame. The issue that you see with the bars below not aligning perfectly with it is because there's a frame of delay and it's a jitter between frame. It's something I should fix. Instead of displaying the current frame, I should be displaying the last frame because the current frame is not over yet. So we don't know its total size, and we're trying to guess it based on the last frame, and it gives that kind of vibration you can see at the top, which is not very pleasing. So I have a task to fix this, it's just I haven't done that in a long time. Under it, what we can see is all the markers that have been added to Orcs. You can add your own markers in your own game. But when you use a debug or a profile version of Orcs, you will have those markers by default. Let me put this here. I want, where are you? Yeah, nah, let's do something like this. Yeah, better. And we can see the hierarchy of the calls. So, like for example, the first function to be called is a render all, which you can see. Let me show them mouse. So here, that's the first function called in the frame. That's render all. This one has under it there are some markers that have been pushed from another function called render viewport, and so on and so forth. You can see the hierarchy of the calls, and they match the bars on the top. So the bars is just like a visual representation of the details below. For every line, the first the first number here is the current time it took in the frame. So the time it took in the current frame. So like we see here that the render all took 0.54 milliseconds in this frame. And the second number, similar to the main thread at the top, is the maximum over the last second. So over the last second, the biggest render all was 69 milliseconds. Lastly, the last number is just the number of time it was called during the frame. So we see that the render all was called only one time this frame, whereas the render viewport was called 2 times this frame. That makes sense because we have 2 viewports. We also see that 29 objects were rendered because the render object was called 29 times during this frame. And you can see that out of those 29 objects, they were all 2D objects, so 29 of them, and they were rendered on screen. Then we can see that we go back to the render profiler, which took like 27 milliseconds, and so on and so forth. You can see all the different code made inside of Orcs. So first we do render, then we do the display update, joystick update, mouse update, input update, console update, and so on and so forth. At the bottom of it, you can see gray lines. They mean that those were called at some point, but not during this frame. So that's why there's a 0x. So like for example, loading the config, compiling the code of shader, applying the physics, rendering the console were all called at some point in the past, but not during this frame. So if I unpause, that's normal that we don't see the physics because there's no physics object. But if I spawn a few objects, you'll see that the physics apply sim result is now called, and it's called 1 time per object. So here we have like 6 objects with physics right now, and it disappeared because all the objects were deleted, and it's going back to the gray part here. So far so good? So the breakup, you mean the different colors?
Yes.
Yeah, so the colors are just a nice way to separate them. So it makes some kind of rainbow. You see that when we're going deep, it keeps the hue, but with a different, well, it's only a slight change of hue. Whereas when we go laterally, it's a big change of hue, like one single spot in this little representation. That's why I'm keeping them on the right. And we can still see how many times they've been called, and we can still see a bar on top of them that shows oh, here's the connection? Okay.
Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
I'm back.
Okay, still streaming. So what I was saying, yes, to the right here we can see all the markers that are not they're not unique. So all those markers here have been pushed from at least 2 different places in the code. So that's why we cannot just put it in one place here, and we put it on the right side. Yes, but the same system applies. Like for example, the grayed lines mean that they are not called this frame, and the white one mean that they've been called. Like for example, the allocation of the bank has been called 35 times this frame, but for a total of 0 milliseconds. You can see that the free was called 5 times. We changed the config entry 1 time this frame, and we got 11 config values this frame as well. We sent 75 events, and the interesting part is the display draw arrays. It's a number of batch we display we push to the GPU. And this time we push 6 batches for a total of 9 milliseconds, for a total of 0.09 milliseconds. So 90 microseconds. Lastly, under all those markers, we have the tracking of the memory. So we have different different types of memory, like memory for the audio, for the config, for the debug, for the physics, general system memory, temp memory that's usually allocated and treated within a single frame, text memory, video memory, and the total of all the memory. For all these, you have the first number is the current live allocation. So for example, in the main memory, we currently have 385 live allocations. And this is the max total allocation we had in the past. So the max for the main memory, we went up to 388. And here the same thing, but as instead of just being the numbers, it's the actual size taken in memory. So like right now we are using 4.37 megabytes of memory, and the maximum was also 4.37 megabytes. So the last number is the number of transactions we did since the beginning of the application. Transaction is either allocating or deallocating. So you can see that since the beginning of the running the program, we did 399 allocation in the main memory. We did 7 in audio, 32 in config, 6 in debug, 12 in physics, 1700 for the text. And total, we currently have 2,208 allocations that take 12.22 megabytes in memory. And we did 2,316 transactions. And you can see that if I let it go, these numbers actually don't move because Orcs is very conservative as far as memory allocations are done. The way I can show you more allocation is by spawning text, because every time we spawn a text, we allocate it. So you can see that the mem text will go up when I spawn more text. And you can see the transaction going up, and they will go down when we delete them as well. So more on the bars at the top. Yes, where would you like to know? Yes, as I said, the 4 rows is because right now we are 4 cores deep, and that's here. But so it's not it's in this particular example we only have 4 cores deep, but it can be different number based on your program. Yes. So yes, the memory is pooled. All the memory locations are pooled. Oh, I mean all. Most of them, the only exception being the text. The other exceptions are every third-party plugins like GLFW or Box2D and things like this. We track their location, but we cannot impact how they are done, if they are pulled or not pulled. But every memory allocation done by Orcs is pulled beside that. Yes. My pleasure. Yeah, the frame, the gray box is the current. I mean, yes, it was actually the last frame time, which is why we have a jitter between the gray box and the bars below. The bars below actually depict the current frame, while the top one depicts the last frame. It's something I need to fix. I need to just print everything from the last frame so that we don't have that jitter. And yes, that's the overall time. So like we can see that the last frame was 16.75 milliseconds, and the biggest frame over the last second was 17.93 milliseconds. We can also see that if I unpause it and I remove the vsync, for example, you can see that frames are much shorter now. And you see that the current frame took only 0.75 milliseconds, and our FPS went up to 2000 frames per second, which is something I don't want to keep too long, because my GPU is probably not going to like it. So going back to 60 FPS. Here you can see that the big pink bar here is the display swap that takes almost the entirety of the frame. This is a vsync. That's where the driver keeps the hand and waits for the vertical synchronization. So the whole simulation right now is everything starting from the red bar at the top up until the purple at the bottom. And the display swap is where the driver will keep the hand until the vertical sync has happened. Yeah, exactly. It's wait time in the driver itself. The actual work is just that tiny portion here at the beginning. In that case, of course, if I spawn more physics objects that bounce all over the place, you can see that the actual work gets a bit bigger. Like here, for example, the physics update goes in the 7 or 8 or 10 milliseconds. That's the blue bar here. It does not like when we have like hundreds of objects that change size or every single frame. But it still stays quite well. Yes, the colors do actually match the bars, and there will be more on top of that actually. So if we're good, we can actually go to the history. So by pressing scroll lock, you can actually see the past 300 frames that we keep in mind. It's using the same color as the names and the bar at the top, but it's rendered as a scrolling graph, and you can actually more easily see the spike. And the other thing you can do is, let's generate a bit of noise here. There we go. We can pause with space, and we can navigate with left and right keys, and we can actually go inspect any of the past frames. So the white line shows the current frame we're looking at, and you can see that here, for example, the blue here is the physics simulation, which is the physics update here and the blue bar at the top here. And if you want more detail on that, you can see that now that we're in the scrolling mode, we have a little white square here that is showing which part we're looking at. So for example, this is a side view of what we have here. Like for example, this is the red is at the bottom, then you have the green, then the blue, then the purple. You have the red at the bottom, then the green, then the blue, then the purple. But if you want to go into details and see other depth, you can use the up and down keys, and you can change on depth, and it will only display the markers for that depth. Like for example, on the second depth, we can see the yellow marker here rendered here, and then you can see the blue marker here rendered here. And on the text size, you can see little stars next to the depth that are rendered. Like for example, at this depth, we can see that the render viewport is rendered, is displayed, the render profiler is displayed, the object update is displayed, and the physics apply simulation is also displayed, which are the 4 colors we can see here and the 4 colors we can see here. So by using this, you can actually navigate and find a spike. If you notice a spike in the last 5 seconds, you can pause and navigate and go see and check what happened to your spike. Keep in mind this profiler is kind of very, I wouldn't say crude, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a more advanced profiler like micro profiler or remote trace or telemetry or things like this. But the idea was so that you can still have the profiler in the application no matter what the target, like it runs on the Android or on iOS or whatever your target is. You can actually toggle the profiler and see on the device itself and navigate it. So it does not give you all the detailed information, but it should give you enough so that you can know where to dig or add more markers or use an external tools or things like this. It's more like a first approach profiler. When you know where there's something that is going on, you can either add more markers to get a more precise view of that particular part, or you can just switch to a commercial strain profiler and see what's going on in more details. This is not meant to replace advanced profiler, it's just a first view. And I think that covers it for the profiler.
You mentioned the axis matrix.
Sorry? Oh, the matrix.
You mentioned that these were actually stored on disk.
Oh, those are actually stored in memory. We keep X amount of RAM. I think this is configurable from config, I believe, or is it just hard-coded? Let me check, actually. I don't remember. No, it's hard-coded. I guess it's something we could change in config. So right now we're keeping 3 times 60 frames, which is 3 seconds at 60 FPS. I could put that in config actually, so that people could have a longer history or shorter history. It's not on disk, it's all in memory. Yes, so here you can see that I mapped the hiding the profiler with a key. But of course you can use the console to do that, and all you have to do is swap a boolean in config, which is in the render section, and it's called show profiler. So if I set it to true or 1, it's the same thing, it's displayed, and if I set it to false, it's hidden. And I guess we could add more and more exposure in the config for things like the history, for the keybinds. Like right now the keybinds are hard-coded, but I could expose everything through the config, so that people could actually modify it. Yeah, sorry, just wanted to try something. Let's put the console in. Ooh, that's bad. Let's just restart it. There. So we had this guy here, and on the left, what do we have on the left? We have Twitch. Okay. Yeah, that's about it for the profiler. There isn't much more to it. No worries. My pleasure. If you have any other questions, they don't have to be about the profiler or anything. I'm happy to answer them. Or if you want, we can go like over more recent features that went in.
So yeah, interested. Yeah, yeah.
So let's see what we have here. Whoops. I guess it's probably easier if I just go on GitHub. That's fine. But if you had any question about Orcs, don't hesitate. So what went in recently?
So I guess
Mhm.
when that frame issue in Profiler is interesting, I'll be able to take another look at it, see if I can figure out why my program is glitching. And on several machines, including my little laptop.
Okay, that's interesting because the capture you showed me was really at the vsync level. Like your game itself was taking very little amount of CPU, and everything was happening inside the call to the swap, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, correct. So the swap is working most of the time, which is good. Look, it probably helps now that I know how to work the profile. I can actually drill into where it actually glitches and filter out some of the stuff that I don't need to see.
Mm-hmm.
So it might clue in as to what it is. And I noticed it doesn't seem to be a problem too much on the demo application. So, but it does happen in the UFO application. So there must be something specific that I'm doing there. So it needs repair.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see it because I mean I didn't experience this kind of stuff with all the projects I've been using, so I would definitely be curious to see what's going on. Oh, that feature actually we could describe the recent change of how random values can be expressed. Like if we're going in, if we're looking for the particle.
Oh yes.
So here, for example, we can see that there. So if you look at where I put the cursor, there's some particles going down. And we can see that in the config, the speed is random between minus 50 and 50 on X and 30 and 100 on Y and 0 on Z. So, actually, let's do it like this. So we can remove the Z component because we are not using it as a starter. And we can toy around with the other values. So, and as you remember that everything is going to be picked up live. So for example, if I put like something like this and I save, you can see that now some particles are going up, some particles are going down. and we can have like a full coverage on the circle. However, what we can do now is we can have a random with steps. Like for example, let's say that we want maybe the speed is not the best. Let's remove the speed. So they're all in the same place, and let's actually spawn them on a yes, on a bigger surface. There we go. So here, for example, we're spawning them on a line between negative 200 on X and 200 on plus X. But you can see that they cover the whole line. Let's say now we want to spawn them every 10 pixels on that line. So what we can do now is that we can give an increment in the random, like saying this has to be every 10 pixels on X, we don't care on Y, we don't care on Z. And if we do that now, they should align. Oh, this 10 is maybe not the best. Let's say 50. And we should see them getting like every 50 pixel. There is no in between anymore. Like let's say if we do it like 100. And you can see that they get agglomerated in one place. We should probably remove like the velocity and the scale and the effects. Well, that's probably not the best demonstration, but that was the idea. So here oh, I went back to this. Okay. I just start the release version here. There we go. And of course we can always change things on the fly, like the actual objects themselves. Like let's find the graphic, particles, yeah, particle. This is a particle graphic, and these are pluses and x's, but we can actually like say we also want tux. Oops, it's a bit big. Actually, let's just let's change the scale. Scale of the particle. Small tuxes. Yeah, so I don't remember what recent feature went in. There's a bunch of tiny things, but let me check. If I look in, multiple job for make finance of we don't care. The step increment for the random. we now can control, we can copy paste from the console. We have also the new mappings for the buttons, for the joystick. Everything that comes with GLFW3. We can change the icon of the game. Like for example here there's no icon, but I could have changed that and I can put an icon. So if we look at the settings and we're looking for icon, we can define a list of icons in the display. So if I open the Orcs INI and in the display I can say icon list, and I will just give one, which is the tux. And if I restart it, we should see the icon. There we go. Little guy here. Twitch, there you are. And of course we can change the mouse cursor as well. So set cursor, we can put like, first we can show the cursor. And yeah, we do support WebP, we support PNG, WebP, TGA, BMP, a couple of other things. And we can also change the cursor itself. So we can either give it, well, we can give it a name that is compressed formats. Yes, we do support compressed format on the mobile versions, like iOS and Android. We do not have compressed format for desktop yet. It's one of my to-do list. But it's pretty straightforward to use. We actually do support some compressed format, but not all of them. Let's see what we can check. A bit late here. Let me think. C workspace Orcs. Extend. No, I don't think we have DXT yet. I need to add it. So yeah, no, we don't have DXT support yet. It's something I need to add. We do support PVRTC on mobile, as well as KTX and ETC 1.2. But on desktop right now we don't have any compressed format support. It's something I've been wanting to add for a long time. I just need to get to. Oh yeah, no, that's definitely a reasonable concern. Oh yeah, recently I did support also, like when you have an animation. Before you needed to have a graphics. So now if you have an animation, you don't need a graphics. However, before when you had an animation, you could not change some properties on a per frame basis. Like for example, you couldn't change the blend mode or the color on just one frame of the animation. It's something I added last week, I believe. So now you can override any graphics properties on a per frame basis or on a per animation basis, depending on what you want. Another way to illustrate. No, we haven't covered that in the tutorial yet because it's something that Fullyberg needed for for their current Destroy 2 game, and so I added it like a week ago. And that's what you saw when I was doing the test for streaming, the papers you saw, when that was blinking and changing color. That was my test for animation. So here, go back to the mouse set cursor. If we put the hand up, we have a hand here. We can, what do we have? I don't remember all the, we have the arrow, we have the I-beam, we have all the classic cursors as well. To look out for the tutorial for the animation, no, not yet. I should probably add it actually. Actually, there's I have a Trello card to add something to it as well, because I want to add another feature, and I won't ask you for any tutorial before I'm finishing with the feature. The other feature being, yes, this one. A way to inherit from default animation frames when using a prefix. That probably doesn't tell you anything, but it's something I would like to do, and I will show you what it does when it's done. I also want to support the use parent space with spawners. Right now the use parent space only works with cameras. And what's also coming soon? Yeah, repeat maybe. Different allocator, and there's a bunch of stuff here. And looking for the compression, compressed texture. Yeah, there we go. Add support for compressed texture to Windows, Linux, OS X. It's been a card for quite a long time now. It should probably, it's issue number 13 on GitHub, so the only issue we have on GitHub are just like enhancements, and that was one of the old ones. Like, yeah, this one has been added almost 2 years ago, but the actual issue on GitHub is much older than that. I should really get to it at some point. But for 2D games, so far the games that have been made with Orcs usually don't need much of RAM video memory, so it's definitely something we're going to address. But we've done it for mobile because it made more sense back then, but it will come. Going back to the cursors, I should be able to, let me remember how it works. When we do a mouse set cursor, we're giving it a texture name directly or a graphics name. I don't remember. Let's try a texture name. Tux WebP. Yes, okay, it's directly the texture name. So now my cursor is tiny tux. I mean tiny. Well, it's tux, and you can see that it's a real cursor. So it actually goes outside of the screen, and I can give it like a pivot as well. Like let's see, 30. Oops, 30. It's not enough. I don't even know what the size of that guy is. Like 130. So now it's more centered. Yeah. But it works like it's a hardware cursor, so it can go outside of the window and just a regular cursor. And you can use any images as well. Let's go back to the good old arrow. We added support for multiple monitors, so that now the windows will remember where they were on multiple monitors, and you can actually ask it to spawn at a specific place on any specific monitor. It's not something I can demonstrate because I only have one monitor, one single screen here. What else can we show easily on the recent stuff? I guess the config, we can show it quickly. Like here, if we just create a temp and we call it val, and we're going to ask a random between 0 and 100 by 10 increments. And now if I'm getting that value, did I put an uppercase? No. You can see that they are all by 10 increments, so that's the stepped random we saw earlier. And you can do it with vector as well, like 0, 0, and we want to constrain the first component but not constrain the second component. And you'll see that the first one will be constrained, not the second one. No. Yeah, it was a feature used. I don't remember why. It was for some kind of effect. Again, for Destroy 2, they need this kind of feature. So it's something I made like a couple of weeks or 3 weeks ago, something like that. What else can we do with recent things? Of course, we can use, like what I was explaining earlier on the channel today, was using commands as a value, so something that's evaluated lazily. Is there a website? That's a good question. I do not know if there is a website, but they have a Twitter account right now. So let's see, twitter.com, fully bugged, I guess. Yes, so I'm pretty sure that yeah, this tweet, for example, is about Destroy 2. But I don't think there's a website yet. It's barely been teased, and I don't know where. I'm not part of the development of the dev team for the Destroy 2. I'm only doing support. I was so Fully Bugged is mostly a friend of mine, and he's doing projects with different people. So, like for example, Little Cells was a project I made with him, but the Destroy one is doing with someone else. Narwa on the Gitter chat, and I'm doing support for them when they need new features or things like this. It's one way to drive the choice of the next feature to be implemented in Orcs as well. Like every time someone needs something, it's a good incentive for me to actually implement it. Otherwise, there are so many to choose from. Sometimes I just say, I don't know which one I'm going to take. And when they need something with a specific deadline, I can just focus on that, and it's much harder for me to do it instead of having to pick my own priorities. What else has been shown? Like the interactive mode for the script is not very interesting, but I mean we can just show it. You need bats and orcs. So before that it was only working on the command line and you had to put the name, but now you can just double click it and it will actually ask you for the name of your project. So let's say I want to create it here. It's going to create my project, and I can then open it directly with Visual Studio. Tab project for SLN, and where is Visual Studio? It's here. I'm going to stop running Orcs, and I'm just going to load that solution. So creating a new project is very simple. All you have to do is like run init. It will generate all the files and you can just like compile it. Let's compile the release version. It will actually know where Orcs is and everything, and you can just start it. And there you have your template project with a bit of source, a bit of config, and you can just start hacking it. So right now you see that there isn't much to it. There's like a sound at the beginning and just an effect on the logo. But it's a good place to start playing with the engine actually. And I lost the chat again. There we go. I can just like yes, it's much easier now to create new projects than before, and the more we're going to extend it, like with support with scroll and things like this, it will be much easier as well. Yes, we do need to finish the scroll one. I really want to rewrite most of scroll so that I mean, scroll is now is what is from 2009. So it's almost 10 years old, and so many features have been now made at a lower level inside Orcs itself. I just need to rewrite scroll so that it actually take advantage of Orcs instead of having a duplicate set of similar features. And of course you have the console and you can let's see, what's the name of that object? Camera, viewport, fade in, color cycle, object. It's called object. Well, so we can find the object, and we can change its angular velocity, for example. Let's make it turn faster. There we go. We can do whatever we want. We can modify it. So like, what's the name of the sound already? Oh, it's already it's appear.org. Okay, so let's not play with this. Close project and temp project. Where are you? You're here. Bye bye. You served your purpose. What else can we show quickly? It's always kind of the same thing. It always surprises me when people don't know about features, but it's probably because I need to be more effective in communication when I add new things. But for me, it's part of the engine, so it's hard to remember what is obvious, what is not obvious. I guess a good starting point would be to look at the pending tutorial cards. Like for example, here I see that we have the two-component vector literal. So as you've seen earlier, we can use two-component vectors. Before, we always had to put a third component. Now it's not the case anymore. What else? So that's the cursor thing. String ID type and replace all. Okay. Yeah, illustrate the at dots. That's an interesting feature, but I don't think it's what I should put. Oh yeah, localization support to sound and I think I put it to something else. Okay, I guess just sound. So before that, we add localization support. Let's just take a... Oops, I've lost my mouse. Where is my mouse? There it is. Okay. So for that, let's make a quick sample here. We're going to put we're going to create a language list. Yeah, multi-language speech game. Now you can actually use the localization for not only text, but also text, sounds, and graphics. So let's try a language list. We're going just to do like English and French for now. those are just names. You can put whatever you want, and you can see that in language you can just put entries in it. Like for example, in the English section, I'm going to put hello, and hello will be hi world. And in French, hello would be bonjour tout le monde. So now we can just use this tag as a text, and depending on the current language, it will be displayed like this or like this. So let's make an example. Like, let's find the particle spawner. Particle source. I think it's called particle source. Here you see there's a graphic, and that graphic is using a texture. Let's not use a texture. Let's use a text. And let's use the hello string. So to let Orcs know that it's a localized. Let's use the hello. So now if I start it, hopefully what we should have is, yep, French. There we go. We should have hi world. Let's see if I did my work correctly. And I guess I didn't. So what did I do? Actually, you know what? Local get current language. Oops. That's not what I wanted to do. Ah, it's because we don't have a current language. Well, there we go. Why don't we have a current language? Language template. Oh, I guess it's because this is loaded too late. Can I reload the language? No, so let's just put, it's because my test is not in the right place. Let's put it in Orcs INI here. And let's try again. Yeah, now it's English. And you can see that, oh, I should probably not make it pulse. So spawner source, particle source. So we don't want any effects. We can keep the color, and we're going to put scale of 2. And let's try this again. Okay, as you can see, it says hi world. Oh, actually, you know what? Particle source, and we're going to say that smoothing false. It should be more readable. There, more readable. Let's get back to Twitch, and there we go. So here we have the text, of course, and we can change the language on the fly. So local set language. And now we are going to French, and you can see that it's updated right away, and it's bonjour tout le monde. So that works well for text, but before that we only could do it for text. Now we can actually localize graphics as well, and sound. So the way it works is by what level? Actually, I don't remember which level I put it. So let's look for. Is sound not defined? Local. Oh, there we go. So at the music and at the texture level. And the font. Oh yeah, we can also localize the font, but that was there before. And okay, so let's try with the music. We're going to use one music like. Actually, let's do it on the same object so that it's less confusing. So here, that guy here is going to have a sound list, which is himself, and with the music. I mean, difference between music and sound is loaded in memory, music is streamed. So the music is something I have here that a friend of mine made, and we're going to loop the music. Okay, so if we restart, now we will have that music. The thing is that, see that the music here is hard-coded, but let's actually loop.org workspace code bin. Do I have any other music in here that I can use directly? Yes, I think what is this? I don't even know what this is. Let's alpha.m. Let's just use this guy here. Oh, I already had my bad. So let's go back to our languages. And here we're going to call it, I don't know, my music. So in English we're going to use GB loop, and in French we're going to use alpha. So now here, instead of using just the, where was I? Instead of doing directly the hard-coding name, we're just going to say that it's a localized tag, and the tag is my music. So now, if I did everything correctly, we have a music. And if I change the language, you can see that the music changed as well. There we go. And it works the same with graphics as well. Like for example here, graphic, we set up, why is it graphic, where are you? Here we said it's a text, but we can actually do it the same with the texture and say that it's, I don't know, let's call it particle. And here in English and French, we're going to have particle. So regarding the question on the streams, if you're using music, they will be streamed on top. So they are not ready to play, but they will be streamed as soon as it changes. Mean that they won't be both in memory at the same time. So as we're just swapping the stream on a different file. If you use the sound, which means that they are loaded in memory, what will happen is that if no one else is referencing the old sound, it will get unloaded and only the new sound will be there. However, if you use the keep in cache property, both sounds will stay in memory and you can swap on the fly very easily and without any delay. Oh, interesting also, if we look at the profiler here, remember that we had different threads, and now you can see that there's a streaming thread here. Yeah, sorry, I'm turning off the music. Let's remove the music. So I call it my music. There we go. We're going to remove it. And part graphic, oops. There. So, and we can do the same thing with the graphic, like textures. We say it's particle, and particle we say that in this case it will be text, and in this case it will be, I don't know, let's talk one of the ball. And same thing if we start the game, and you can see that in English it's text, and if we change local, select language, and we're going to French. And French, it's, oh my, it's a ball. There we go. It's because I didn't choose the same clamping mode on it, so it's kind of weird. But you get the idea. French, and go back to English. Yeah, text. So this is loaded on the fly. And of course, if you're in development mode, you can modify images on the fly. Like if I get text, and that's this one I'm using here, and I want to open it with paint.net. Open, because WebP is not recognized. Of course it's not. So let's modify one of the wall instead. Let's go back to the French language, it's less intrusive. And we're going to modify the data for bounds. We're going to modify like the wall, and again with paint.net. Where is my wall? Here's my wall. There. At least paint.net knows how this works. So if I have, you can see all my walls there, and let's edit it. So like, let's just draw on it. There, the yellow line all over the place. As soon as I will, I'm going to remove the shader here. As soon as I'm going to save this file, you'll see that it's going to get picked, saved, it's going to be picked in the engine and hot loaded, and you can see all the yellow lines on it. And it works with any kind of resources. You can change the music on the fly, you can change text, config, whatever. And now if I restore this and save it again, and there it is, back again. But in any case, localized everything is interesting for like games where you have actual voices or text on textures. Like, I don't know if you have like a store with a name on it and you want to change the name based on local. Everything can be handled by the engine. You don't have anything to do besides just saying which language you want, and all the assets will be reloaded and hot swapped automatically. And of course you can use the localization for anything. I mean, if you can put it's not just for text, graphics and sound. It's just that text, graphics and sound will be hot loaded automatically by the engine, but you can put your own kind of assets as well. Yeah, we try to make it as painless as possible for the user. So the config is very neat with that, where you can actually override stuff locally. Like for example, when you release a game, you can have like a set of config files for your game, and for different platforms, you can just override tiny things. Like for example, when we made Little Cells, we had a set of config files for the game, and then we had an extra config file for Steam, an extra config file for Android, and those were just the tiny deltas for those platforms. Like for example, on Steam, we would have like leaderboards. On the Android, we would change how the UI is displayed and where the objects were put and everything. But we would only put the delta in these, and depending on the platform, we would load those config files on top of the basic one, and that will just override the tiny part we need. Another neat feature for that is that you can use debug anywhere. Like for example, I don't know if I bounce, let's see where, bounce viewport, composing viewports, those are hard-coded. No, see, I have a viewport list here. That's actually a neat feature, because we can do easy off-screen rendering to a texture. So here let's actually run it, so you can see. on the fly. Okay, I'm going to remove that guy. So let's just go back. There. Okay. I need to fix that label. It's something I broke today, I think. There we go. So uploading this and going back to the Twitch and config. I really need more than one screen. Okay, so here we actually have more than one viewport. We have two viewports. One viewport renders the object, and the second viewport composites it to the screen. The first viewport renders the object to a texture. The second viewport uses that texture and applies the shader and renders it to the screen. There the shader is off, there the shader is on, but it's actually two viewports. So the bounce viewport collects all the image through the camera, and the compositing viewport is just a single shader. There is no camera associated to it, and it's just a shader. And that's the shader that's used. And you can see that if it's enabled, then it will do the weird wavy thing you see. Otherwise, it's a straight copy. But the thing is that we can, let's say we would just have like this crazy effect all the time. Let's see that our shader is just like this. So all the time you have this. But you would like to see what the original texture. Well, here it's quite easy because the shader is not very interesting, but here what do? We get the texture, pixel, gray color, and here we're just going to get the gray. Pixel, texture sensitive. We're going to remove this. There. So now we only have like the distorted version of the of the image. And here we're just going to put black, so we don't have those weird stuff going on. There. So now if we wanted to, for control, to be able to see the image behind it, there is no way to see it. But the thing is that that texture exists. And you can see that if we're looking at the bounce viewport, we are going to render to a texture called viewport texture. That texture does not exist at all until we create the viewport. When we create the viewport, it says that it needs to render to a texture called viewport texture. So it's going to look into all the textures that exist in memory, and if it does not find one, it will create one that will match the viewport properties, mean that exactly the same size, and it will render to it. So that's automatic. If you want to create that texture, you don't need to do it in code or anything. It will be done by Orcs itself. But that texture we can actually retrieve. So here if we come here, that's not it. That's what I want to do. And here you can see that we have texture commands. We can actually find the texture. So let's find the texture called viewport texture. Viewport texture. Here it is. We can actually save it to disk. Texture.save. And I don't remember the syntax of texture.save, so I can ask it. Texture save. The syntax is first the name, the texture or the name, and then the file name. So texture save. The idea of the texture, which is this one, and I'm going to call it my temp texture.png. Up. And now if I look on my disk for my temp texture, you can see that we actually save the content of that texture to the disk. So that's nice to be able to check the content of a temporary texture, but it would be even nicer if you could display it on screen, like just in debug. So here, as you can see, when we have bounds, those are the viewports we're going to create. But what about we make it more debug friendly? Let's see that at the end, we're going to load a file called debug.ini. If that file does not exist, it won't do anything. Like, I'm starting in the game, nothing changed, because debug.ini does not exist. However, if debug.ini did exist, So let's call it here. So here, that's how we include files, by the way. You put an at the beginning and at the end, and it's going to look for that file and or in that resource, and we'll load it after that. We can actually override any properties. Like for example, you can see that in the properties that are very visible, you can see that the title of the window is oh, actually no, the title is not used here. My bad. So we can see things like we can go up to 500 balls, which is not very with the shader. Let's say we don't see the cursor. We're going to override the cursor. So we see that it's a section called bounce, and we say show cursor, and we're going to say true, and we're going to save that file as debug.ini. So this file is I mean, the developer will keep it locally, but it will never get shipped. So it's just extra debug stuff that will happen only on his build, so on their build. And so by starting in now, you see that the mouse cursor is here because I overridden it in the debug.ini. But now let's do something more interesting. Like in the bounce, you've seen that we decided which viewport we're going to display. How about we add a third viewport? So what we can do is that we can actually extend an existing list by using plus equal, and let's call it debug viewport. So now we're going to create a debug viewport only on that debug build, in that if the ini file is not found, nothing will happen. And this debug viewport is going to do something. It's going to do something like the compositing. So basically it's going, let's give it a background color of something like very flashy, red, so that we can see where it is. Let's see what properties we have for the viewport as well. And here you can see that we can give it a relative size. Let's give it a relative size of a quarter on each axis. And let's put it at the top right. So now we should be able to see a debug viewport that's red on the top right next time I start the game. So let's see if it works. Up, we have an extra viewport here. And in this viewport, we can do a lot of things, but a very simple things would be just to put a shader to render our temporary texture. So let's do this. So as you can see, here what we did is that we gave it a shader. So let's do the same thing, shader list, we use ourselves, and the code for our shader is void main and what we want is GL frag color, and we want just the texture 2D of GL. I'm going to copy paste it, it's going to be much easier. Of a variable called texture, we haven't defined yet, but we're going to define. And our position is GL text squared 0 XY. There. So basically we're just sampling the texture and we're going to render it there. That won't work because right now we don't have the texture parameter, but let's say that we have a texture parameter. To make it less confusing, let's call it my texture. We have a my texture parameter. And in my texture we can say that we actually want to see the content of a texture that already exists, like our viewport texture that we saved to disk earlier. And by doing this, we should be able to actually see its content displayed here. And you can see that here there's the content of the texture, except that because it's a last viewport rendered, it's been rendered after we cleaned the screen to black, so we can only see the FPS counter on top of it. However, if I put this viewport after the bounce, like we do bounce, viewport, this, and compositing viewport. Compositing viewport, and let's try again. What did I do? Isn't that the correct viewport names? Bounce viewport, viewport texture. Okay, bounce viewport, compositing viewport, background color shader, list bounce shader. Code, use cut and param. Oh, I forgot to to give the parameter list. Param list my texture. Still not. So when it's not working, it's best to just go to debug and see what it tells you. So relabel, we don't care. Viewport, bounce viewport, debug viewport, compositing viewport. Doesn't say anything more than that. And it's not rendered. So what's going on? Did I make a mistake in the shader? My bad. Use custom param, no. Param list, we have my texture. My texture is viewport texture, that's the right name. And let's see if the actual shader works by putting in green. Okay, we are not seeing it anymore. So, oh, because of course I put the other viewport on top of it. That's my bad. The compositing viewport erase everything. Okay, so now it's green, and if I change here, there. So now we can actually see the content of our temporary texture that's only in memory. We can have it in debug. So it's something that the user will never see, but for debugging purposes, we can add things on the fly, and we didn't have to change any code for that. All we have to do is that simple ini file that will override some properties, that will just create a viewport on the fly, and that will retrieve the texture in memory and display it in this tiny corner. So it's very handy to do this kind of debug things. You can add a lot of debug information, like for example, let's see if I can show you a game I work on with a friend very quickly. There. Okay, and you can see that, for example, here the rendering below the character, this is all something that's defined in debug. It's not something that is part of the shipping config files. And some way I can actually see, I can select guys and you can see a red square under it. All those are not code, they are just like overriding debug. And that means I'm going to just check for their animation change and list them in the console. Like for example, see that this guy has a red one, but if I remove the red one from this guy, you see that the log is not updated anymore. And this is something that is just done by config override. It's not something that has been put in code or anything. And that's about it. That's just an example. So here in the example, debug is like extra text added to this guy. I can actually even slow down time for this guy. Like for debugging animations, we had keys to be able to slow down the time just for one character, and it's all overrides I did in config. And I think that's quite a lot for today. It's already 2:30 in the morning, so I will probably let you... Yep. My pleasure.
A lot of work to do with this, yeah.
Thank you for sticking around, both of you, and let me know if you have any other questions, and always happy to answer them.
Alright, cool. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Talk soon. Talk to you tomorrow.
See ya. Have a good evening, and day, and night, depending on where you are. Bye.